You know, I think we take happiness for granted. Many people argue that you need to suffer to truly understand happiness, and you know what? I think I agree with that. But I'm not saying that all of us need to go through pain to truly enjoy our life, but I think seeing some of the worst things that humanity can do and still does do to this day can make us appreciate the small things in life. Like, if I go out to like a library and someone holds the door open for me, it feels nice. Or going out with friends who are, busy with work and all that kind of stuff. And I do believe that we need to understand the sort of pain that people will go through for us to really enjoy the good things in life. I myself, when I was younger, in elementary school, I suffered with identity and self harm during my childhood. I felt excluded from everyone, and I felt that I didn't meet their expectations. And every time I set a goal for myself, I would always be reminded of their gazes of disgust and disappointment, and that scared me to really take control of my future when I was younger. I feared taking the initiative for that very reason, and I still do to this day. And now I'm 18. It's been more than a decade, and these feelings, they still linger at the back of my mind. I believe that the world was against me, and it's hard to root yourself for that very reason. And now I'm trying to work on myself so that I can make the younger version of me proud of who I've become now. And I would say that during that time, I felt lost. I didn't really have a direction, and now I think I'm starting to get a grasp of where and what I truly want to do. You know, I try to use this channel to express my thoughts, and I like to see, the engagement and conversation that some of the videos get with the comments. And it made me sort of realize that I thought that I had no value in this world. And if I can continue to continue this channel and make these videos, I think this will help me become more confident. And I think it forces me to realize that what I make, the content that I produce, on the internet, just like millions of other people, has values for people to genuinely think about what I say. It makes me realize that people will genuinely listen to my content and think of what I'm saying, and come to conflict with it possibly, or agree with what I say. And I think that's amazing that I'm having people, it doesn't matter how many, it could be 10, 1, 100 people who will listen to this and understand my words and genuinely listen to what I'm saying, because that's something that I struggled with when I was a kid. I'd be bullied and all those kind of things. And during middle school as well, during elementary school, I was bullied, and I felt that my voice didn't really matter much. I would tell the adults, this kid's bullying me, this kid's is annoying me, like these things like that. I'd be bawling my eyes out. I was a very fragile kid, very emotional, sensitive, many people would say, and I do believe that I still am. I'd go to these adults and they'd tell me, oh, the kid's just messing around. Or, if I was, bawling my eyes out for, a particular reason, which could be many, they tell me, oh, don't worry about it, this kid, I'll reprimand him, I'll do these kind of things, I'll make sure that they're talking to certain talking. And, they talk to them, but like, the second they turn their back, these kids would come up and gang up on me and, say these terrible, rude things about me. And, these words, nearly a decade later, still fester at the back of my mind, because it's hard for me to, move on from things that really make my world feel like it was crumbling against me. And I know that going to school is something that's really going to be a very short time of your life, especially elementary school. But, when you're in that situation, in the present time, you feel that the world is against you. And it was so hard for me to understand that this is just a facet of life that's going to pass on. When I become older, I won't have to worry about this. But it genuinely felt that this was my whole world and everything was against me, that I couldn't do anything. And I fell into depression, and this lasted until middle school. And I had ideas of like self-harm and stuff like that. And I was able to get the necessary help. But those kind of things, those things that genuinely leave marks on you mentally, it's hard to accept and convey those into words. This is one of the reasons why I started to read, because I felt that these emotions that I'm feeling and how people express themselves is something that I sort of struggled to understand, because I was just so focused on myself and my own suffering, that I wasn't able to really attached to people that cared about me, friends and family, people who helped me go through my struggle. And now I want to be able to understand people and possibly help people. And I do know that the content I've been posting recently is quite negative, but I think it's better than able to get these emotions out, on the internet. And while they may, ruin someone's day, make them worse, or start to contemplate things that might not be safe for themselves or the people, but this is something that I wanted to get off my chest because I feel like it's something that's very deep and personal to me. And I know many people, and not just myself, are having to struggle through this, and many of them aren't able to find the assistance that they need, whether it's because of money or something else. And it took me a long time for me to find something I was passionate about. And when I was able to get better, I would say, when I entered high school, I wanted money. I saw that money I saw that money would allow me to get all the things that I wanted, like games, things that would distract me from the future that I was dreading every day, because I couldn't find out what I wanted to do with my life. And I stuck to it. I was glued to it. And I used this money to drown myself in these pleasures, temporary pleasures. But now I realize that money is something that shouldn't rule over me. It's a tool. That this money needs to work for me so I can pursue the passions. And I know it sounds very corny, but it's something that allows me to use the one thing that I can't buy with money. It's time. No matter how much, it doesn't matter how many millions of dollars you have. There are always people who are jealous of the amount of time that young people have, such as myself. And I took that for granted when I was younger. And you know what, even though I suffered so much, and I'm not trying to farm pity points or anything of that, but what I went through, I think I don't regret it. It was a constant cycle of dread and suffering during my first maybe 13-14 years of genuinely being alive. And now I'm able to understand that I can control the present, and I don't have to dread the future like I once did when I was younger. And now I want to make my mark on this world, because I feel that these words that I'm saying, every day, people are genuinely starting to understand and take them into account. And I think younger me would be very proud of myself, because I'm taking this initiative, something I was so terrified and dreading of, when I felt that everybody was laughing behind my back. And it's quite selfish that I do make these videos, because I do them to express my own thoughts and interests, but I think it's healthy for all of us to express ourselves in any way that we see fit. Hopefully it would not be something that would be a detriment to other people, possibly put other people in harm. I don't want that. I would never want that. But there are people who just can't get this kind of help, and I hope these videos makes people understand that they aren't alone, and that this road to suffering isn't something that's going to last forever, and that you can find happiness. And once you do, don't take it for granted. Find something that you genuinely like, whether it's YouTube or maybe a sport, and follow that for as long as you can. But at the end of the day, those days when you aren't doing the things that you love, those passions you aren't seeking, you need to come to terms with yourself, understand your life has become such a rocky road that you've had to traverse on, and that these things are normal, and that you shouldn't let these little failures take over the life that will last possibly 100 years, maybe, with the way technology is going. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you for watching.